So think about the last time you sent like a really thoughtful text message to someone. Maybe a little vulnerable.
Oh, like a couple of heavy paragraphs.
Yeah, exactly. A couple of heavy paragraphs, you hit send, and then you wait, you see the little typing bubbles appear
Right, and then they disappear.
and reappear, and then after what feels like an absolute eternity, your screen just lights up with a single letter K.
Oof. Yeah, no punctuation, no emoji, just the raw, unadorned letter K.
It's brutal, but monitor what happens in your body in that exact fraction of a second. I mean, you go from simply looking at this geometric shape on a piece of glass to experiencing a full-blown autonomic nervous system response.
Oh, absolutely. Your stomach drops.
Right, your heart rate accelerates, you get that like flush of heat on the back of your neck, and within milliseconds, you have constructed this entire reality where this person is furious with you, you've ruined the relationship, and you're just being entirely dismissed.
It is a complete physiological takeover. I mean, your brain flooded your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline before you even had the chance to, like, consciously articulate a thought.
Wow.
Yeah, the physical reaction is so overwhelmingly fast that it just bypasses your conscious awareness entirely.
And that invisible lightning strike in the brain, right? That millisecond between seeing a pixel and just feeling sheer panic, that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
It's such a fascinating mechanism.
It really is. We are exploring this whole architecture of human perception, cognitive processing, and situational awareness. And our mission today is basically to map out the hidden machinery of the mind.
Right, using a really incredible stack of sources.
Exactly. We've got 4 interconnected frameworks today. They're basically diagrams that serve as a practical guide for moving from that anxious, super reactive state into like a more intentional, clear-headed reality.
Yeah, and these frameworks, they operate as a sequential blueprint. They illustrate how we gather data from our environment, how we, inherently distort that data
Right. Because we always do.
always, and how those distortions trigger these emotional cascades. And ultimately, they show us where we can actually insert a wedge into the process to regain control.
Which is what we all want, right? So to understand how our brain processes reality, I think we have to start at the absolute baseline. We have to ask, are we actually paying attention to reality in the first place?
That is the big question.
Yeah. And if we look at our first source, which is this framework detailing the 5 levels of situational awareness, it becomes pretty clear that most of us are essentially sleepwalking through our environments.
Well, yeah, because you cannot process data that you completely failed to collect, right?
Right.
This framework categorizes our environmental engagement into these distinct tiers. And it starts with level 1, which is appropriately labeled tuned out.
Tuned out. Okay.
Yeah, so picture someone navigating a really crowded city sidewalk. Their head is down, they're staring at a screen, they're wearing noise-canceling headphones.
Basically everyone on my morning commute.
Exactly. And they are completely outsourcing their awareness to the crowd, right? They're just assuming everyone else is going to move out of their way.
Which is a huge assumption.
It is.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, the brain is fundamentally an energy conservation machine.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, in familiar or like seemingly safe environments, your brain powers down your situational awareness just to save cognitive load. It relies on its predictive models instead of taking in real-time data.
Ah, I see.
But the framework points out a really severe danger here. In level 1, you are entirely disengaged. You are fundamentally unaware, and that strips you of agency.
Meaning you can't act, you can only react.
Exactly. You only have the capacity to react to what has already happened to you. It's basically a state of maximum vulnerability.
That makes a lot of sense. So moving slightly up the scale, we hit level 2, which is aware. And this is just baseline presence, right? You're attentive, you notice your surroundings, your brain is actually processing real-time data instead of just coasting on autopilot.
Yeah, just basic healthy observation.
Right. And then level 3 escalates to medium alert. So now you are actively detecting changes. You're looking for friction points. You're anticipating potential issues before they even materialize.
Which gives you a significantly increased state of readiness.
Exactly. And then level 4 pushes into high alert. This is an intensely focused state. Your sympathetic nervous system is highly engaged. You are actively scanning for threats, maximizing your physical and mental readiness to respond to immediate danger.
Right, this is peak tactical awareness.
Yeah, but here's where I completely tripped up when I was reviewing this scale, because a final stage, level 5, is labeled comatose.
Yep, level 5 is comatose.
And it lists characteristics like unresponsive, no awareness, unable to react, and life at risk. I mean, if we were moving up a spectrum from relaxed observation to like hypervigilant threat scanning, dropping comatose at the very top feels completely contradictory to me.
It does seem weird at first glance.
Right, because standard threat level charts usually escalate to maximum panic or physical combat, not unconsciousness.
Well, and if you view the scale as just a straight linear progression of alertness, it makes absolutely no sense.
Okay.
But the key to unlocking this specific framework is the mandate that's written right across the bottom of the diagram. It says, awareness is a choice. Stay alert. Stay alive.
Okay, stay alert, stay alive.
Right. So level 5 is not an escalation of level 4. Level 5 is actually the biological consequence of remaining at level 1.
Oh, wow. It's the outcome of tuning out.
Yes. Comatose represents the ultimate physical vulnerability. It's literally what happens when a threat materializes in your environment and you were just too distracted to detect it in time to deploy a level 3 or 4 response.
That is wild.
It really hammers home the reality that situational awareness is not just, a tactical buzzword for security professionals. It's a fundamental survival mechanism.
Okay, that shifts the entire perspective for me. So the scale isn't a ladder. It's more like a closed loop, where the absolute lowest level of awareness leads directly to the highest level of physical consequence. So let's assume you are operating safely at a level 2 or 3. Your head is up, you're actually gathering data. What happens to that information once it hits your retinas and your eardrums?
Well, then it gets fed into this cognitive engine, which is detailed in our next framework, the OIC process.
Oh, I see. Observation, interpretation, conclusion.
Exactly. This maps out the ideal, systematic way a healthy mind should process environmental data to arrive at a rational decision.
Right. And I love this because it functions incredibly similarly to an audio mixing board.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah. So the first phase, observation, is the raw audio feed coming straight from the microphone. The framework asks what data exists, and it forces you to look at things like your own presence, the source of the data, the raw sensory data, clarity, and duration. You're just trying to capture the clean, unedited track of reality.
Right, no filters yet. And the most critical slider on that observation mixing board is step 7, which is verification.
Verification, yes.
The diagram explicitly asks, can this data be confirmed with other evidence? Because without verification, you are just feeding static and noise into the next phase of the board.
Which is interpretation. And if observation is the raw feed, interpretation is the equalizer.
Oh, for sure.
This is where we start sliding the knobs to figure out what does it mean. We start tweaking frequencies based on behavior, context, capacity, and intent.
But the knob that distorts the track the fastest is step 7 of interpretation, and that is bias.
Ah, yes. Bias.
The framework forces the user to ask what bias might be influencing me. And when you skip the verification step in observation and then you fail to recognize your bias in interpretation, you artificially boost the frequencies of your own insecurities or past traumas.
And you completely mute the frequencies of objective reality.
Exactly. You end up listening to a heavily distorted version of the actual event.
Which is basically what happens every time people are doom scrolling online, right? They see a headline, they skip verification, their bias cranks up to 10, and suddenly they're outraged over something that isn't even fully true.
Yep, it happens all day long. And then that distorted track gets pushed out to the final phase, which is conclusion.
Final mix.
Right. And conclusion involves acknowledging what you actually know, running a probability assessment, making a decision, and maintaining adaptability in case new data comes in.
Adaptability is key there.
It is. The framework makes this promise that if you maintain a clear process in observation, it yields better thinking in interpretation, and that results in smarter action in conclusion.
It is a beautifully logical system.
It really is.
But, and I think we both know this, it is also a system we almost never use in our daily lives.
It's sadly true.
I mean, nobody meticulously runs an OIC protocol when a car abruptly cuts them off on the highway or when they receive a vague text message.
No, of course not. We abandon the logic because the human brain is not optimized for objective analysis. It's optimized for rapid survival.
Right.
So to understand why the OIC process so frequently derails, we have to look at our third source, the response cascade.
The response cascade?
Yeah. This framework diagrams the exact, messy, instantaneous way the mind actually constructs reality.
Okay, so the response cascade lays out this 12-step sequence, and it begins with step 1, reality/event. And the framework is extremely firm on this point. The physical event, the car swerving or the pixels on the screen forming a K, is the only objective truth in the entire sequence.
That's it, to step 1. Because step 2 is observation, where you notice the event.
Mhm.
But step 3 is where the architecture of the mind fundamentally alters the data. Step 3 is filters.
Filters.
Yeah, before you even consciously register what you're looking at, the data is forced through the sieves of your past experiences, your deeply held beliefs, cultural expectations, your identity, and, your unhealed trauma.
So it's instantly tainted.
Instantly. And those filters aggressively warp step 4, which is interpretation. So now you are no longer making sense of objective reality. You're making sense of a filtered, highly customized version of reality.
Wow. Which brings us to step 5, meaning assigned. So you generate a narrative to explain the event, and this is where the framework drops, I think, its heaviest insight. It says, you do not respond to reality. You respond to the meaning you assign to it.
That is the core of everything right there. Let's look at the mechanics of that. The physical text message is not a threat.
Right, it's just a letter.
The meaning you assign to it, though, like, I am being rejected, that is the threat. And because the brain treats psychological threats with the exact same biological urgency as physical predators, that assigned meaning triggers step 6.
Emotional response.
Yes.
And this kicks off step 7, your internal narrative, which feeds directly into step 8, the decision. That drives step 9, action, leading to step 10, the consequence, step 11, memory stored, and finally step 12, future bias.
It's quite a cascade.
It really is. The consequence of this event literally becomes the filter for the next event. The framework categorizes this entire 12-step slide as the reactive loop. You assume the worst, your emotions take the wheel, you get tunnel vision, and you just react impulsively.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. And here's my problem with treating this like a 12-step checklist. It feels completely instantaneous in real life.
Oh, absolutely.
When that car swerves into my lane, the visual of the car and the physical surge of adrenaline and rage happen simultaneously. It doesn't feel like I observed data, passed it through my trauma filters, consciously assigned meaning, and then selected anger.
Right.
It feels like a single biological reflex. So is it actually possible to intercept a cascade that moves that fast?
It is, but you're right, it feels instant because of the specific neural pathways involved. It's basically the amygdala hijack.
Okay, break that down for me.
So when visual data enters your brain, it goes through the thalamus, and it is routed in 2 different directions at the exact same time. One path goes to your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, analytical center of your brain.
Okay.
The other path goes straight to your amygdala, which is the primitive threat detection center.
It's the shortcut.
It's the shortcut. The neural pathway to the amygdala is physically shorter, meaning the threat detection center receives and processes the data milliseconds before the logic center even knows the event occurred.
Oh, wow. So that explains the physical reaction.
Exactly. That is why your heart rate spikes and you grip the steering wheel before you can consciously articulate the make and model of the car that just cut you off.
Your body is reacting to the meaning before your conscious mind has even finished the observation.
Precisely. Which is why the intervention proposed by this framework is so crucial. On the right side of the diagram, it provides the method to interrupt the cascade. And it all hinges on one primary action.
The pause.
Yes, the pause.
Which is just simply putting space between the stimulus and the response.
Right. And it sounds like a psychological platitude, just take a deep breath. But it is actually a biological necessity.
Really?
Yeah. When you intentionally pause, you are literally buying time for the electrical signals to reach your prefrontal cortex. You are holding off on a reaction until your logic center comes fully online.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And once it does come online, you shift from the reactive loop into the aware loop.
Exactly. And that is where you deploy the next tool in the framework, which is reframe.
Reframe, okay.
Because your emotions are entirely dictated by the meaning you assign, you can actually regulate your physical emotional response by choosing a more accurate, or at least a more helpful, story.
So instead of assigning the meaning like, that driver is intentionally disrespecting me and challenging my safety, which just floods you with cortisol.
Right, which makes you want to honk and yell.
Yeah. Your prefrontal cortex allows you to reframe it and say, maybe that driver made a reckless mistake, or perhaps they're having a medical emergency.
Exactly. The event remains exactly the same. The objective reality hasn't changed at all.
The car still swerved.
The car still swerved.
Yeah.
But by altering the assigned meaning, You neutralize the emotional response. You regain the ability to seek understanding, to see the broader context, and respond intentionally rather than reacting defensively.
That is so powerful. You step out of the reactive loop and you basically prevent a negative consequence from becoming this rigid future bias.
You got it.
You do not respond to reality, you respond to the meaning you assign to it. I mean, recognizing that mechanism gives you immense leverage over your own mind.
Immense leverage.
But practically speaking, I mean, we make thousands of micro-observations every single day. The cognitive load required to pause, verify, and actively reframe every single irritation, it would be paralyzing.
And you'd be exhausted by 9 a.m.
Exactly. We have limited mental energy, so where do we deploy it to actually maintain this intentional clarity without burning out?
And that question requires transitioning to our final framework, which is the OIC control overlay.
Okay, the control overlay.
Yeah. We now understand how to process data cleanly and how to interrupt the rapid-fire distortions of the cascade. The control overlay maps out precisely where to direct our cognitive resources. It organizes human experience into 3 concentric zones of control.
All right, let's walk through them. The outermost ring is the external zone, and this represents everything fundamentally outside of your control.
Everything.
It encompasses other people's actions, their feelings, their underlying intent, the past, environmental conditions, the passage of time, and ultimate outcomes.
Yeah. And you can observe the variables in this zone, but attempting to control them is biologically futile.
Right.
When you try to force control over unpredictable external elements, your brain's predictive models continuously fail. And that generates constant error signals in your brain.
Error signals.
Yeah, and we experience those persistent neurological error signals as chronic anxiety.
Oh, man. That
Yeah.
explains so much. So trying to control the uncontrollable literally creates anxiety. Okay, so moving inward, the middle ring is the influence zone. And this is a space of partial leverage. It includes things like communication, leadership, relationship dynamics, your reputation, and negotiation.
Right, so you can apply pressure here. You can shape the environment, but you still cannot guarantee the final result.
Got it. And then the bullseye in the center is the internal zone. This is the only domain where you possess direct, absolute control.
100% control.
It contains your attention, where you place your focus, your commitment to verification, your awareness of your own biases, the meaning you choose to assign to events, your boundaries, and your emotional regulation.
Now, when you cross-reference this control overlay with the OIC cognitive engine we discussed earlier, an incredibly revealing pattern emerges.
Oh yeah, I noticed this. Think about the middle phase of the OIC process, interpretation. We spend massive amounts of energy trying to decipher intent or evaluate context and measure impact.
We obsess over it.
We do. But on the control overlay, almost all of those elements sit firmly in the external or influence zones. We exhaust ourselves trying to interpret the hidden motives of other people, which are things we can never fully know or control.
Right. But look at the final phase. Look at conclusion.
The elements of conclusion, so acknowledging your limits, making a clear decision, and choosing adaptability, they reside entirely within the internal zone.
Exactly. The core revelation here is that we squander our cognitive energy obsessing over the interpretation of external forces. But our actual power lies exclusively in how we govern our own conclusions and subsequent actions.
That is a huge perspective shift.
It is. The framework distills this dynamic into a single clarifying principle. It says, your actions matter, but outcomes are shared.
Outcomes are shared. Because the moment you act, your action enters the external world. It mixes with variables and other people's actions that you don't control.
Precisely. And the framework outlines a concept called the control shift. It maps out the direct correlation between where you focus and your resulting mental state.
Okay.
Anxiety escalates in direct proportion to your attempts to control the external zone. Clarity, on the other hand, increases as you fortify the internal zone.
And peace.
Peace is achieved when you fundamentally understand and accept the boundary between the two.
So focus relentlessly on what you can control. Accept the reality of what you cannot. Influence what you can with wisdom, and just master your own response.
That's it. But it demands a complete reallocation of your cognitive resources.
Wow. Well, we have mapped a significant amount of cognitive architecture today. I mean, we started by recognizing that our baseline awareness dictates our survival. We have to choose to wake up from that turned-out vulnerability of level 1.
Yeah, that conscious choice to be present.
Right. And then we examine the OIC process, recognizing the necessity of running our observations through a clear, verified process before our unrecognized biases can distort our interpretations.
You have to verify.
We do. And then we dissected the response cascade, mapping the exact neurological pathway of how our filters warp reality into a perceived threat. And we learned how inserting a deliberate pause allows the prefrontal cortex to catch up, giving us the power to reframe the meaning.
Which is such a critical tool.
And finally, we anchored all of this with the control overlay, identifying that the antidote to chronic anxiety is pulling our focus away from external outcomes and fiercely guarding our internal zone of direct control.
It's a really comprehensive system when you put it all together.
It really is. So for you listening, the next time you experience that sudden, overwhelming spike of negative emotion, whether you get cut off in traffic or you're reading some designed to enrage headline or you're staring down at a one-letter text message, remember the mechanics of your own mind.
Yes. Remember the cascade.
You are not reacting to objective reality. You are reacting to the deeply filtered story your brain just spun. You have the biological capability to pause. You have the intellect to verify the data. And you possess the ultimate power to reframe the narrative.
That is so true. And I actually want to leave you with a concept that extends beyond just managing a single emotional reaction.
Okay, lay it on us.
If we look closely at step 12 of the response cascade, which is future bias, we see that the meaning you assign to an event today becomes the filter for how you perceive reality tomorrow.
Right.
And this connects directly to the principle of neuroplasticity.
Which is basically the brain physically rewiring itself based on repeated behaviors, right?
Yes. The neural pathways you use most frequently
Oh.
become physically thicker and faster.
Oh, wow.
So every single time you allow the cascade to run unchecked, you are biologically reinforcing the reactive loop. You are making it easier to freak out next time.
Is terrifying.
But the flip side is also true. Every time you force a pause, every time you deliberately reframe a narrative from a threat to understanding, you are weakening the synaptic connections of anxiety, and you are strengthening the pathways of intentional clarity.
So you aren't just calming yourself down in the moment. You are structurally engineering a different brain.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
The aware loop eventually becomes the path of least biological resistance. You are quite literally programming the hardware of your future self through the meanings you choose to assign right now.
The reality you will inhabit tomorrow is being built by the meaning you decide to assign today. Just something to consider the next time you get a K.